cutting down posts. We calling back Israel to the hell we know. Throwing out crystals. We don't need these stones. And we ain't no gods. That's a job for y'all. All praise to the Most High. All praise to the Most High, Yahuwah. All praise to the Most High. All praise to the Yah Israel. Tearing down idols, we cutting down poles. We calling back Israel to the hell we know. We throwing out crystals, yeah. We don't need these stones. We ain't no gods. That's a job for Yah. Your word be forsaken, even if we're hated, even if we're hated. We won't go the way of the pagans. We don't need no potions or sages. We won't let your word. No, even if we're, we won't go the way. We don't need no potions or sages. We won't let your word be forsaken. Even if we're hated. Even if we're and we cutting down poles. We're calling back Israel to the hell we know. We throwing out crystals. We don't need these stones. And we ain't no gods. That's a job for y'all. Everybody help me say all praise. All praise to the Most High. I can't hear you say. All praise to the Most High. All praise to the Most High. Hey, all praise.
Peace and blessings. Hope everybody's doing well. And yeah, let me go ahead and pause this. Hey, peace and blessings to everybody that's in the chat, everyone that's online. Hopefully you're having a good week so far. Yeah, family, it's been a minute. It's been a minute. But hey, definitely want to bring you all up to speed as far as some of our revelations and findings. And I think you'll find, especially this next series of videos, pretty interesting, because what we're going to do, in my estimation, is close the gap. What do you mean by that, Brother Benayah? I mean, close the gap as to finding out exactly who you are. Now, if you've been with us throughout this journey, you've noticed that our journey started, of course, we picked up the Bible. We saw Deuteronomy 28, saw the blessings and the curses, saw various prophecies throughout the Bible, throughout the scriptures, and we were able to find out, beyond a shadow of a doubt, especially in my mind, that we are the people of the book. But yet there were those that doubted, right? There were those that still said that, well, no matter what you read in the Bible, that's your interpretation. Give me some facts. Give me some artifacts. Give me some some documented proof that you guys, so-called so-called African Americans, excuse me, you guys, so-called Negroes, are the people of Israel, are the children of Israel. Where is the evidence? So you know what the Most High did? Most High made this, made the evidence start coming out of all different places, right? Whether it be in libraries, we had all kinds of books, and we cracked the code. Praise be to the Most High. He gave us the key to crack the code to show that the evidence was literally locked in these old books, the exact same old books that when our forefathers were in shackles, were enslaved, that they had their hands, their thumbs, their fingers, all kinds of things cut off if they were caught reading those books. And these, keep in mind, these were the books of which had the truth of who we are in them. And so these are the books that we're bringing forth today. And so we have all these books coming out showing, the history, particularly of the Spanish and the Portuguese Jews, showing that, of course, if you have your Bible, if you have your King James Bible, what I ask people to do is, do a quick search, especially if you have like one of those electronic Bibles, do a quick search for Spain. And what you'll do is that what you'll find is that Spain is literally in your Bibles in the book of Romans. I believe it's chapter 15. And this is, you'll find the Apostle Paul there in Spain. And he's literally going to the place where the transatlantic slave trade would start from, hundreds of years later. But in any case, we know that there were believers in Spain, and according to some of these old references certify and testify that our people were in fact in Spain. And so, when we brought out the history, read all those old books, and like I saw, shout out to my brothers and sisters that are in the chat, because I saw some of the comments. Oh, and peace and blessings to Ema Cassandra. You all give a big shout out to Ema Cassandra, Sister Cassandra, peace and blessings. Hopefully everyone's doing well, doing good. And everyone else that's in the chat, just apologize for that. But just wanted to say big shout out to Ema, Sister Cassandra. But just going back to our timeline, family. So in Spain and Portugal, we were able to track and trace the Israelites there. We were able to utilize and utilizing these old references, confirm with beyond a shadow of a doubt they were there. What happened to them? Show that just before the transatlantic slave trade, all this stuff kicked off. They were persecuted. They were, they fled over to Africa. Just before they went over to Africa, or just after they went over to Africa, certain things changed. And actually, let me go ahead and bring up my good old trusty PowerPoint slide. So I'm going to remove this, add my PowerPoint slide. Here we go. And the point of this presentation to you, family, is what we're going to do from here on out. We are going to slowly but surely get to answering the question, where did the Portuguese Jews / Israelites go? And am I an Israelite? We know that, and I know some of you all already know. We already know based off of the facts that we are Israelites, right? Based off of the facts, based off of the prophecies, based off of all the overwhelming evidence that has been out there so far. Hallelujah. But let me tell you, family. Oh, shout out to Pastor Kelly, my cousin, Pastor Kelly. And apologies, peace and blessings, cuz weren't able to jump on your live last night. But hey, if you are, I know if you have time, feel free to jump on as well. I can shoot you the StreamYard. So just let me know. You just send me a text and I'll send it to your email. But in any case, family, like we were saying, so some of us know that we are the people of the book. Some of us still kind of are hesitant that we are the people of the book. Like, I see all the evidence, but I'm just not 100% convinced that I'm an Israelite. When I look at my license, my license says I'm Doug Johnson. When I look at my license, it says that I'm Coach Prime. Pick a name, right? LeBron James, pick a name, right? I'm picking out some of these all-stars, but they are people who are, they literally have Israelite names, but they don't even know it. But yet they don't, like I said, they don't know that they're Israel, and I think what we're lacking, family, is that last mile, right? We were, praise be to the Most High. We were able to trace the Israelites all the way from Spain to Portugal. And let me tell you, family, that this time is the prophetic time, because looking back at how this truth kind of evolved and was revealed, you can see how the Most High caused this to come to pass. Because let me tell you, when it comes to this information, what the catalyst for this information was the internet. It was the digitizing of all these books. Most of all these books that we were sharing with you, that I was sharing with you on my channels and my videos, these were books that had hundreds of pages. I mean, like 500, 700 pages long. And like, I believe one of the sisters asked me, she was like, "Brother Benayah, how in the world were you able to find that reference in those 700 pages?" Kind of just paraphrasing what she said. But she was like, "Because that book is dry." In other words, that book was boring. Had a bunch of thous and ifs, and that old English, if you read it slow enough, it'll put you to sleep, right? Like that sort of stuff. But in any case, family, in any case, family, because of the advent of technology, the digitizing of these books, I'm telling you, the Most High's playing 4D chess with these folks. The Most High had these books digitized, so therefore we were able to quickly search through every single page, every single word with the stroke of a pen, with the stroke of a keyboard and a mouse click. Boom, we were able to search through hundreds of books, hundreds of pages. Not one page was left unturned or unsearched because of the digitization of these books, of these references. So when that occurred, that was, to me, like the catalyst that helped, fan the flame, so to speak, of the awakening, because all of a sudden, all these books that we had no idea to contain all these truths were exposed to being, havens or repositories of the truth. So we were able to bring those out. And so that was one of the, in my opinion, that was one of the main phases of the awakening, was when that occurred. And so, of course, here we are, all these books are out, we got all these videos dropped, but now here we are in the age of AI. Now, you might be thinking, all right, Brother Benayah, where are you going with this? Like, well, I'm just telling you that AI is another tool. I mean, it's just one of those tools, just like the digitization of the references. AI is another tool that we can use to get us one step closer to definitively proving that you are the children of Israel. In addition to, like I saw in the chat, in addition to all the other overwhelming pieces of facts that we have today, the facts that we have today. All right, so I'm going to take a step back. I'm just going to kind of briefly walk us through the history, and then we're going to get to answering the question, where did the Black Portuguese go? And then what we're going to do, family, is we're going to end up answering the question, or starting to answer the question, of how do you find out that you're Israelite? I believe what we're going to do is that we're going to pause as we start to go into that, and then we're going to go into that in the following video. All right, so let's get started, family. He said, "What do you mean, let's get started?" I thought you already started. All right, you know how we do it used to do it in church, right? All right, so Black Portuguese, we know, according to the references, according to all these material that's been out there, whether it be books, videos, we know that they fled to the west coast of Africa just before the start of the transatlantic slave trade, where they were taken in mass and picked up, put on slave ships. We also know that when it comes to the definition of the word Negro, that too was also a major clue as to who we are as a people, because literally the name Negro is literally an Israelite name. It's literally a major Israelite name, is in the Israelite dictionary of all places of surnames. So Negro doesn't necessarily, not only does it mean black, but it is also an Israelite name, right? It's Spanish and Portuguese Israelite name. I'll put that clarification on there. But when these Negroes were expelled from Spain and Portugal, went over to the west coast of Africa, this is when we started to see a territory, a land called Negro land. So it was called Negro land after the Negroes were expelled from a place in Spain or a place in Portugal called the Village of the Negroes. They were expelled from the Village of the Negroes, went over to Africa, west coast of Africa. Then from the Village of the Negroes, we then see a land called Negro land. You have to see the progression there. And then, of course, people called Negroes were then placed, like I said before, onto the transatlantic slave ships, and they were sent over to the Americas. Now, for the most part, if you ever looked at a transatlantic slave trade, one of those maps, one of those interactive maps, or even just a static map that shows you how, what the paths were, like how many slaves went to Brazil, how many slaves went to Central America, how many slaves went to North America. What you'll find is that the bulk of the slaves went to Brazil. They went to South America. And while this was happening, we also have references. We were also able to pull and show you references that showed you that the Israelites were also being sent to Brazil. Now, the question is, were they different people or were they one and the same? And this is where I tell you, family, that we have to be very specific when we talk about definitions and people. When the Israelites, or when a certain group of people from Spain and Portugal came over into Africa, remember, that's when the definition of Negro changed. Negro then meant a person that was born in Africa in 1555. So from 1555 forward, that family, that was those people that were born in Africa, they were the Negroes. They were the Negroes by definition. That's by the Webster Dictionary. But then the question is, well, then what were they calling everybody else that was born and came from different places? They were called by something else other than Negro. We'll get to that later. All right, so here we are in Brazil. Israelites were being shipped over to Brazil via the Inquisition, via the expulsions, and we have dark melanated people over in Brazil, and I showed you, via these references that reference after reference showed that the Israelites were there. We were also able to cross-check that in 3 ways. One is we were able to look at the names on the transatlantic slave trade database. These were the names of people who actually got on the ships. They were in flight to go over to the Americas, and then they were freed. In other words, their ship was intercepted, they were freed, and as they were being interviewed by the people who freed them, the people asked them, okay, you are now free. What is your name? And then they gave that name, and that's the name that you see in the transatlantic slave trade database. So I explain that so that people, because I hear people say that, well, wasn't that the name that their slave masters gave them? No, this is the name that they gave after they were free. Like, this is my name. And when we look at those names, some of those names were the exact same names of the Israelites that were in Spain and Portugal. So that was a cross-check, number one. The exact same names that were over in Spain and Portugal. And we see 2 groups of names over in Spain and Portugal. There was one group of names over in Spain and Portugal of the Jews who did not convert over to Christianity. So they still had those, what people would say, just kind of using their modern day vernacular, they still had the Old Testament names, so to speak. Isaiah, Obadiah, Zechariah, those are the names that we see in the transatlantic slave trade database. Isaac, Jacob, it's in there. But then the other cross-check, the other names that we see in the transatlantic slave trade database, which matches up with history, is we see the what people will call the New Testament names. And these are names that when people decided to capitulate and become, Roman Catholics, Roman Christians, they were baptized, and then they were given, what people call, I'll just say New Testament names. I think they call it angelicized names. It might be mispronouncing that word, but you get what I'm talking about, family. They basically were given names that for the most part you can find in the New Testament. These, and then after they were, converted And of course, the Inquisition was spun up after they converted, or even while they were converted for some people. The Inquisition then took these people who changed their names to what we would call New Testament names, and the Inquisition took those people and shipped them to Brazil. Took those people and shipped them to Sao Tome and then to Brazil, or to some other place in South America or Central America or even North America. And so these names then show up in the transatlantic slave trade database as New Testament names. Paul, John, Luke, Matthew. Those names are also in the transatlantic slave trade database. So we were able to check that off. So we had those two confirmations. One confirmation confirmed the names or matched the names before the Inquisition, and the other confirmation matched the names during and after the Inquisition. And then the third confirmation, family, that we were able to get was the Inquisition records themselves. The Inquisition records, remember, everywhere, that's the thing that, we as so-called African Americans or people of the diaspora don't realize, is that wherever we went, that Inquisition followed us. People with the long coney heads, with the white garbs, with the two sockets for holes, or two holes for two holes for eye sockets. And today, of course, we call them the KKK. But back then, they were associated with the Inquisition. Excuse me, had to take a drink. Back then, they were associated with the Inquisition. Inquisition was Israelites were sent to the west coast of Africa. Inquisition was set up on the west coast of Africa. Israelites were shipped over to Brazil. The Inquisition was shipped over to Brazil. The Israelites were shipped over to Barbados. The Inquisition was also sent over to Barbados. And then something happened when they came to America. Because remember, Spain did have a foothold in America for a time, but then, that went away with certain wars and stuff. But that's a discussion for another day. But just getting back to that third confirmation, family, the Inquisition records show that the, who they call Africans or Negroes, they were the ones that were being punished for practicing what they call Judaism, right? Or Israelite. Israelitism is a modern vernacular that, folks kind of made up. But in other words, they were persecuted or prosecuted for practicing the laws, statutes, and commandments. So that was three confirmations that they were over in America. Check. We could check that off. We can say, we can say for sure they were there. We could also cross-check that with DNA records, DNA that was taken from the Israelites over in Sao Tome, and that DNA matches the so-called African-American DNA today as well. That is yet another confirmation. So just showing you, family, that this was the progression of validation that was taking place to follow the Israelites, from Spain and Portugal onto the transatlantic slave ships, all the way over to the Americas. And then the question was that, okay, well, we see that these Israelites are over in the Americas in great numbers, or especially in Brazil, but then how did they get up to North America? Like what, how did that happen? And this is that map that I was telling you about. And this is the map that shows you, most of those thick lines go to Brazil and, South America. And then when you look at how many went up north to North America, it was a very small number. And this is why some of our brothers and sisters, when they did their research, and they were like, and they brought up some good arguments, good points. They said, well, hey, when we look at the transatlantic slave trade, there was a very small amount of people that were in chains that actually came to North America. And this is where you get that whole indigenous conversation or discussion going. But one thing that's missing from a lot of these numbers is the number of indentured servants. And I apologize because I was trying to grab that, that collateral, that graphic, but I wasn't able to find a good graphic that showed the number of indentured servants over in North America. But needless to say, it was a lot. All right. A lot of indentured servants over in North America. But in any case, family, we also have certain events that occurred that when we read references that talk about the Israelites being over in Brazil in great numbers, we then read references that showed that, well, when Spain, came over and started attacking Brazil, of course, the Israelites fled from Brazil, and that's when they went up to Barbados, and of course, from Barbados over to Charleston, South Carolina. Say, all right, but I hear you, Brother Benayah, but that's them. What about us? What about me? This is the question that people are asking, right? They hear the history. They can see beyond a shadow of a doubt that Israelites were on the slave ships. They can see beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Israelites landed there. They had boots on the ground. But the $1 million question is, what about me? Am I an Israelite? Well, we're going to answer that. We're going to start to answer that. And I'm going to show you, most high willing, how you can answer that in different ways. But before we get there, I just want to show you a couple of things as far as, the distribution of the slaves and the distribution of Israel. So before, as I told you, when we looked at that chart, you saw that there wasn't a whole lot of slaves that actually came over into North America, especially early on, right? A lot of the bulk went over to South America or Central America. And you can also see on this chart where early on, from 1619 on up, the number of slaves that came over in chains was very small comparatively when you look at the 1700s. You can see in the 1700s, this thing just kicked off. This is round about the time when the English, Britain got a hold of that asiento, which was the approval from the Pope to take part in the transatlantic slave trade. This is right around the time when if you ever looked at those maps of the kingdom of Judah, like it's a map of west coast of Africa, where the slave coast is called the kingdom of Judah. Well, it was called the kingdom of Judah right around this time, like right when the slave trade but started in earnest, right when Britain got a hold of that asiento. That's when the kingdom of Judah shows up on your maps. It wasn't by happenstance, family. It was not by happenstance. All right, so now as we look at this, family, you can see that this is a breakdown, and you can see at the top, African Americans in the 13 colonies. This is the source, Rutledge Atlas of African American History by Michael Siegel. And you can see, family, this is early on because, the state of Georgia wasn't formed until the 1700s. And so likewise, you don't see a whole lot of, what folks would call slaves there, 1,000 African Americans. Charleston, South Carolina, you can see that there is a substantial number of African Americans, using that modern day vernacular, in Charleston, South Carolina, 30,000 in 1682. And also, just kind of point this out too, family, where it's one of those things is where wherever you see a large number of so-called African Americans, you also have a large number of Israelites. Like Charleston, South Carolina, as you can see, compared to all these other places, has a large number of African Americans. Well, they also have a large number of Sephardic, Spanish, and Portuguese Israelites. Same thing to Virginia. Shout out to my cousin again, Pastor Kelly with We Woke Now. Definitely go and check out his channel, family. We Woke Now. He has some great content out there, so definitely go out and support. But Pastor Kelly, my cousin, he's out in Virginia, the Richmond, Virginia area, and as you can see, there were 60,000 African Americans over in Virginia. 60,000. And guess what? Virginia, too, was also one of those places where it was known that had a large population of Israelites. You may be surprised to hear that Baltimore was one of those places. And then all these other places, they have marginal numbers. But the question is, all right, so what happened to these Portuguese Jews when they came over? What happened to them? Because, and did they just disappear? Did they change their names? Some of them did. Did they leave their religion and pick up Christianity? Most of them did. Is that how they melted away? Yes. In actuality, depending on what books you read, if you read modern books will tell you that the Spanish and Portuguese Jews, they melted and blended into the Ashkenazi Jewish community. However, if you read the old books published from the 1850s or older, what you'll find is that the Spanish and Portuguese Jews didn't want anything to do with the Ashkenazi Jews. There was a schism between the two communities. The Spanish and Portuguese Israelites looked upon them as not legit. They didn't even want to have Shabbat service with them. They were like, y'all stay over there. We're going to be over here. We good. And then it wasn't until the 1800s when that Ashkenazi community began to grow, because there was a major influx of that community into the States, partly due to the, what was that law called? It was like the immigration law, like those immigration laws that it allowed for the immigration of the German communities, but then what it did was that it suppressed immigration from other communities. But again, that's a story for another day. All right, so back to our timeline here. So family, we have we have the colonies starting up. We have the African American community starting up. The places where the African American communities were large were the exact same places where the Israelite communities were large. And actually, family, the reason why I'm not pulling up, just a FYI, the reason why I'm not pulling up these references are actually covered in in a couple of my videos. So what I'll do is, after this live is over, I'll go back and grab the link to those videos and put them in the description, so that if you want to see that breakdown, you can, see all the references and stuff that go along with what I'm telling you. But this is just meant as a refresher as to what happened to the communities, kind of show you like where we left off, like where do we leave off at in our research. In our research, we were able to, I'm just trying to show you that we were able to show them all the way from Spain to Portugal, getting on those slave ships, disembarking. We were able to show them, getting off in Brazil, Barbados, Jamaica, places in the Caribbean, and then eventually making their way into the deep South, like Charleston, South Carolina, or whether it be in places like Virginia. Now, so the question is, and then over time, what we found is that the Israelite community just disappears, and then the Black community, so-called African Americans, we rise as far as who we are and in our numbers. And so the question is, what happened to them? Where did they go? Did they just disappear? And it also, basically, family, as we answer that question, we're also going to answer the question of, who am I? We're going to answer both questions because they're related. All right. So here, family, what I'm showing you here, I just wanted to give you an idea of where the slave population was in the 1800s. So this is around the census of 1860. So this is just before the Emancipation of Proclamation. And of course, the places that have a dark color, these are the places where the slaves population was the largest. So you can see right along the Mississippi River, very large slave populations. And you can also see there's a band that goes through Alabama, through central Alabama, through central Georgia, over into the Carolinas. There's Charleston, right around there. Places in South Carolina, you can see have very dark colors, just like you find over in Mississippi, and then on up into the Virginias, right? And like, again, these are places where the Israelites were located in great populations, in great numbers. And then likewise, just to show you that, we as a people haven't really moved too much from these places. So this is from 1860. This is the slave population. Now, this is the census. This is a census of the African American population of modern day. Now, I know it's the map is a little bit scaled out some, so it may not look a little bit different. But what you can see here is, same thing. Like if it's black, it has a high concentration. So this is the Mississippi River again. And again, what you find is that the present day African American population still resides in the same places that we served as slaves. For the most part, I'm sure people are getting on planes and moving around, and one person may move from New Orleans over to Atlanta, but just to show you that in general, we are still living in the same places. Same places today. Goes through Alabama, central Georgia, and then over into South Carolina. Those same places are dark, right? And then all the way up into Virginia. Same places. And I believe there's a scripture that talks about that we are in captivity. We are in the land of our captivity, the land of our enemies. Now, what I'm going to do, family, is when you think of the Israelites coming over into the Americas, over into the U.S., what people will call the U.S., United States today, you have to keep in mind that there were different paths. Not all the Israelites took the same path. Some went from Spain and Portugal to the west coast of Africa, whether it be in, Slave Coast, Sao Tome, Principe, or Angola. And then some left from there over to Brazil. And then, like I said before, up to Georgia, where some actually went from Spain and Portugal over into Central America, then up into the Americas. Or some came down from Spain and Portugal down into what you see, this little dot here. This is the Cape Verde Islands. This is an island off of Cape Verde. Came here, and then from here went over to Georgia or South Carolina. And these would be the Black Portuguese. Now, remember I said the Negroes were the ones that over in, per definition of the Webster Dictionary, they were the ones that went over into Africa, right? But the people that were not born in Africa, the ones that were still born in, whether it be Portugal or Spain, they still went by or were referred to as Black Portuguese. So you had two different names, same people, but they came over in different ways. The people over in Africa came over in chains. Sometimes the people over and it also depends on what time is too as well, family. Like if it was after the transatlantic slave trade, after the emancipation, then of course they came over on their own, their own dollar, their own volition. But what I'm going to talk to you here, what I want to show you is just one of the paths that the Black Portuguese took. And then I'm going to show you that the Black Portuguese not only landed in the Americas, but they were actually thriving in large numbers. So for that, we're going to follow this path from Cape Verde over to Georgia or over to South Carolina. Now, for that, we're going to take a look at some references. And it says, this is for, you're looking at Massachusetts. You can see the reports of the Immigration Commission, and this is volume 22. Now, a couple of things before we get started, just so that you know that, Massachusetts, the Black Portuguese went by different names. And that's another thing that you'll have to learn, that when the Black Portuguese came out of Spain and Portugal, when they came over into Africa, they were given different names. They went by different names. They were in Africa, they were called the Portugalese. They were called the Tengamos. They were called the, that third name is escaping me for the moment, family. They were called the Lancados, and they were called the Degradados. So Lancados, Degradados, Tengamos, and Portugalese. Those were some of the names that they were called over in Africa. They were also called the Yahudi in some places in Africa. And the reason why I'm just kind of giving you some information, because I have had people say things like, I went over to Africa and I asked them, did you know anybody named Judah? And they said no. Well, family, that's because they were going by a different name in that place. In that place, they were going by the Yehudi. So if you go over there and ask them about the Yehudi, they'll be like, oh, yeah, we know about the Yehudi. In a different place, in a different spot in Africa, you ask about the Yehudi, they might not know who you're talking about. But if you ask about the Portugalese, they'll be like, oh, yeah, I know those people. They over there. So you have to know what name they were going by in what area. All right, so kind of digress a little bit, but just had to put that information out there. So back to our timeline. So the Black Portuguese in Cape Verde who came over into the Americas, they were called, their unique name was Bravas. Bravas. Now, this has to do with where they came from. So the small island where they came from in Cape Verde was called Bravas. And you can see here, I'm just going to just read just a little bit of this where it says, among more than 20,000 foreign-born Portuguese in Massachusetts. So just so that you know, it was 20,000 of them. We weren't just talking about a small number. It says, perhaps there is no element more significant nor more interesting from the standpoint of public welfare or of private economics than the Black Portuguese. From the island of Cape Verde, west coast of Africa, who off the west coast of Africa, not on the west coast of Africa. It says, within a period of 10 or 12 years, have practically monopolized the labor on the cranberry bogs of eastern Massachusetts. So just wanted to show you that, yes, indeed, when we look through some of these references about and try to find Black Portuguese in the Americas, yes, we can find them. And not only do we find them, but we find them in these same places where you see some of these dark colors. All right, they match up. And here's another one, reports of immigration of the Immigration Commission. This is 1911. And it talks about, it says, the Black Portuguese all come from the island of Cape Verde, chiefly Brava and Fogo. It says, these are very small islands with a rough, hilly topography that is with difficulty made productive agriculturally. But the climate is almost tropical and fruits and vegetables grow almost simultaneously. All right. So again, just another reference showing that the Black Portuguese had landed, they had boots on the ground, they were here in the U.S. Immigration Commission, this is another book. Same thing, Cape Verde Islands, immigration of Bravas or Black Portuguese. This is just an index. And they were cranberry pickers, family. They were cranberry pickers. And you can see it here on the screen. It says the cranberry pickers of Massachusetts on the larger bogs, at least, are chiefly Bravas or Black Portuguese. They are largely recruited from the banks of dock laborers near New Bedford and neighboring seacoast cities. And unless they are regular bog laborers, they spend about 6 weeks of the year on the bogs. And another one, reports of Immigration Commission. And they have this Immigration Commission, family, what you'll find is that it has multiple volumes on it as well. And it says, number employed, it says, a canvas was made of some 25 of the largest bogs. I think it got cut off a little bit. Bogs and many smaller ones in Nantucket. And in Plymouth, you remember Plymouth Rock, right? And Plymouth and Barnstable communities. One of these bogs, 1,800 pickers, practically all Black Portuguese were found. It is safe to say that the total of that race employed during the season is fully 2,500 to 3,000. All right, just showing you that the Black Portuguese were here in large numbers, still are. And it says, as a matter of fact, said the superintendent of one of the largest bogs on the Cape, the Black Portuguese are the only dependable supply of labor that we have. No other sufficient source of supply remains. The Black Portuguese, again, all come from the island of Cape Verde and chiefly Bravo and Fogo. And of course, you know, these were the islands that the Black Portuguese, that the Jews were sent to early on when they were expelled from Spain and Portugal. All right, so now I'm just going to show you that in addition to Massachusetts, I also want to show you the Black Portuguese in other places like Rhode Island. And it says in Rhode Island, the Portuguese are found mainly around Providence and in Bristol and Newport communities. The census of 1905, so this is after the Emancipation Proclamation, it says enumerates them by place of birth, sex, occupation, blah, blah, blah. You can see it there. No classification of native-born Portuguese parents. Says those born in the Cape Verde Islands are Black Portuguese. You see, family, those born in the Cape Verde Islands are Black Portuguese, and those not probably came originally from the Western Islands. And then just read a few more of these, and it says a greater difficulty in New Bedford is the presence thereof a large number of Bravas and Black Portuguese. These people are a distinct type, but having Portuguese names, they cannot be distinguished in written records. Now, what they're getting to, family, is that when you got a Black people over in the Americas, what do you think eventually happened to them? Even though they're Black Portuguese, what do you think eventually happened to these communities? And you probably guessed it, they started merging with the African American communities. In other words, the title of Black Portuguese fell off, and they were just called Africans. Hey, y'all just some Black Africans. You know how folks do, family. You got a little color on you. Oh, you an African. Got that 1 or 10%. You an African. And this is what happened, family. Just kind of sticking to the well, I'll read a little bit above it, where hopefully you can see my mouse, where it says, under this heading, the classification Portuguese includes only the so-called white Portuguese who are the subject of this study, and not the Black Portuguese, commonly known as Bravas, because many of them come from the island of Brava in the Cape Verdes. These Black Portuguese are classified in the commissioner's report, listen, as African. So in other words, that Black Portuguese identifier, name tag, got replaced. They are now an African. So if you're wondering like what happened, right? Name change. Not only did their group ethnicity name change, but also their actual last name started to change as well. And that's going to be one of the last things I'll cover here with you. It says the Black Portuguese are classified in the commissioner's report as African, Black, but no attempt is made to distinguish them from the true African Negroes, except as their place of last permanent residence is also noted. And read that again. But no attempt is made to distinguish them from the true African Negroes, except as their place of last permanent residence is also noted. In other words, the reason why I'm reading this, family, is to show you that when Black folks came over here, they all lumped us in one group. Didn't matter if some of us didn't even, touch the mainland of Africa. When we came over here, say, oh, you Black, you African American. If some of us came directly from Britain, or they were born over in, some other place, came over, oh, you African American. Don't even worry about it. Don't even tell me where you're from. You Black, you African. That's what it is. That's how it went down, family. And of course, there are records, that got admitted in deportations. Deportations may have something to do with the naturalization laws that took place. But then last but not least, family, this is kind of like where I want to end this particular video. And this is, how do I know I'm an Israelite? So at the very least, Brother Benayah, you showed me references that showed that, okay, the Black Portuguese were over here in Spain, and they were over here in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and I also have references that showed them over in Baltimore and some other places as well. Also over in my cousin's church down in Savannah, Georgia, First African Baptist Church. There was a large community right around the church. They were the ones, in my opinion, that made up the congregation at that church in Savannah, Georgia. So we have them in Savannah. We have them in Atlanta. We have them in Charleston, South Carolina. This is undisputed history, right? This is just, reading the books that you can find in libraries, whether it be college libraries, institutions of higher learning, or even in seminary schools. So this isn't, something that's debated or something that's questioned, right? Because it's in the books. Nobody's questioning up to this point. We good, right? But then the question is, how do I know that I'm an Israelite? How do I know that I'm related to those people, right? And to answer that question, what I'm going to show you, family, is, and this is what we're going to do, most high willing, in our next video. But I want to show you a little bit about how I started my research on my family and started walking it back, and also showing you some of the pitfalls and the roadblocks that I ran into answering this question of how do I know if I'm an Israelite? And one of the easiest, quickest ways to start, family, is to start with your last name. So shout out to my cousin, Pastor Kelly Richardson. So Richardson is an Israelite name. We actually looked that up, right? My other cousin, Bishop Brown. Brown is his last name. Brown is literally in the Sephardic dictionary, surname dictionary. So there's a surname dictionary that has multiple last names of Israelites, and Brown is in there, and Richardson, I believe, is in there. But then you might be like me, family. So one of my last, I say one of my last names, my grandfather told us, he said, hey, our family name was Torbert, Torbert. And it's an odd name, Torbert. And what I did, and this is what we're going to do, we're going to have a working session, right? Most High willing, we're going to have a working session. And I'm going to show you how what I did with my last name is what I want you to do with your last name as we walk through this. And I see Johnson on there. Johnson has a secret. I know because I looked it up. Well, if you can remember to be on our next live whenever we do this, we'll definitely I'll definitely show you the information I have on Johnson too. It's wild. Johnson is a big one too, a major last name. All right, so but going to use my last name as an example. And like I said, we're going to have you use your last name. We're going to walk back through history because, unlike my cousin, Bishop Brown, we could literally just open up a Sephardic surname dictionary and find his name there. And I believe Richardson is in there as well. Look and find Richardson in that Sephardic surname database. But what about Torbert? Torbert. I was like, oh man, am I left out the party? I know I'm in there somehow because I'm related, via blood to the Browns and whatnot. When I go to my ancestry.com, or if I go to my DNA report, and you can go and see like what people you match with. I can click on my DNA matches, and a whole bunch of Browns show up. So I know I'm in the house, right, family? But my last name's not in there. I was like, why is that? And this is what some of our brothers and sisters are running into. And I just want to leave you with this. And that has to do, family, with names change over time. And this is what I say that, things like AI and some of these other tools will help us to show us the transition of the name over time. Because, in doing my research, what you're looking at, family, is the progression of my family's last name over the years. It starts off at the very top. It starts off, from the 18th and 19th century. And you can see it there. It kind of gives some, verbiage about, the emphasis on certain letters and stuff like that. But the main point of me showing you this, family, is I want to show you how it changed over time. So when I go to, whether it be, Chat GPT or whatever, or just do just a basic Google search. And this is one of the things I do want to stress, families, that the way you use these AI tools is that the way I'm going to recommend you using the AI tools is to ask AI for the reference. Don't ask it to interpret. Say, no. Just give me the reference. Find me references for this. Go. And then AI can go off and do stuff, right? And bring you back the information, right? To me, like that is going to be, the one of the major benefits of using AI, because what they're doing, family, is that they're introducing a lot of erroneous data in there. And really the only way that you can check it is to ask for the references. Like, okay, AI, you asked for that. Well, give me the references that support what you just said. And then it'll just say something like, oh, I don't have it, my bad. So anyway, I know I kind of deviated, but anyway, but back to what I'm saying, family, just so that we can wrap up. You know, you might be just like me. I looked over into the Sephardic dictionary, and I didn't see my last name in there. But then one of the things that I did was I went and looked at the etymology of my last name, and also you can also cross check this with ancestry with census records, because in census records you'll see that people's last names also change. So I can confirm that through those references as well. But you know, my last name used to be Torbert. Then before that, in the 17th and 18th century, is Tubret. Then you start to see some major changes occur in the 16th to 17th century, Tourbe, right? And that's because there's a French aspect to it. And believe it or not, when I do my DNA, when my dad did his DNA, there was French. I mean, literally, the places where these names were found were places that were in in my family's DNA. And then all the way to, this name, Turbi or Turvi, was in the 13th and 15th century. And then, of course, I was able to trace history from that last name. And I found some very interesting information about these last names. And I will caveat this and warn you, family, that you know how we got those crazy relatives that sometimes you're not too happy about, and you might run into a situation like that where you do look into your history and you find some craziness going on. Just pray about it, repent, pray to Most High, say, hey, Most High, that was them. Just grant me some grace on that. Just saying. So, all right. But anyway, this is what we're going to do, family. Most High willing, we're going to go back. We're going to use your last names, your surnames. And this is just going to be one of the tools that we're going to use, Most High willing, to answer the question, am I an Israelite? Because the reason why I say just one of the tools, because there are many different, you have many different pieces of evidence which proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are Israelite compared to anybody else. Like the amount of evidence that you have supporting that you are an Israelite far outpaces anything else that anybody else has. Hallelujah. All right. So we will get to that, Most High willing, in our next video. Like I said, I was trying to wrap up before an hour. Looks like I'm just under the time. So, all right, family. Well, hey, thank you for sticking with me this long. Someone asks, am I doing that live tonight? No, not going to do the live tonight about the last name. We'll do it. Let's see, tomorrow's Tuesday. It might be Wednesday night. We'll have to wait and see, family. But I kind of want it to be his own video, his own standalone video that anybody can go to and just, use that video as a how-to as to how to research your last name to see if it's a Sephardic name, and also to look at the history of your last name. And also how to cross-check that using DNA, right? Because it's all going to tell you the same story, family, that you came from Spain and Portugal. And of course, once you know the history of Spain and Portugal, that where the Israelites left when they came out of Spain, some went over to Portugal, some went into Africa, some actually went up into France. They went to a place called Navarre. There was a spot between France and Spain, between France and Spain called Navarre. It's called the Basque region today. And that's where my family came from, in that area, the Israelites that went up into that area. But in any case, I'll share some of that with you next time. All right. Well, hey, love you, family. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And like I said, we will get into answering this question, and we're going to reveal some exciting things about what happened to the Black Portuguese. And we're going to identify that you are, in fact, an Israelite. And with that, I say peace and blessings. Love you, family, and shalom.
Tearing down idols, and we cutting down posts. We calling back Israel to the hell we know. Throwing out crystals, we don't need these stones, and we ain't no gods. That's a job for y'all. All praise to the Most High. All praise to the Most High, Yahuwah. All praise to the Most High. All praise to the young Israel. Tearing down idols, we cutting down poles. We calling back Israel to the hell we know. We throwing out crystals, and we don't need these stones. We ain't no gods, that's a job for y'all. We cutting down poles. We calling back Israel to the hell we know. We throwing out crystals. We don't need these stones. And we ain't no gods. That's a job for y'all. Everybody help me say all praise.
All praise to the Most High.
I can't hear you say.
All praise to the Most High.
All praise to the Most High. Hey, all